welcome to another edition of Flyer Update. I'm your host, Mark Deal with Flyer Media Productions, and today I'm joined by Superintendent Greg Johnson and Special Ed Director Lynn Krominga. Greg, Lynn, thanks for joining us today. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing MTSS and getting into what it is and a little bit better understanding for our parents and community as to what kinds of supports, which is really what MTSS is all about, will be in play and available for students as we head into another school year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Johnson just to give a really high-level overview of MTSS.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for hosting our program today. When you think about the supports that we have for our students in place, and most recently as a school district, our work with strategic planning, I think MTS is that framework, it's that system for us to be able to provide the necessary supports, not only for our students, but for our teachers as we move ahead with trying to continuously improve the instruction and student achievement in our district. And three words that come to mind for me that are really important in MTSS and our strategic plan are consistency, alignment, and evidence-based. And you'll hear, I'm sure, Lynn talk an awful lot about those three.
Yeah, Lynn, so maybe you can do a little bit deeper dive for us around MTSS and
Sure.
defining out really what it is and what kinds of things people can expect.
Sure. So as Mr. Johnson said, MTSS is a multi-tiered systems and support. And we focus on 3 tiers within that. Tier 1 is typically general education, the core curriculum that our district is using. Tier 2 is to support our students that are struggling with smaller pieces like reading or math or writing. And then Tier 3 is a little more intensive where they are still accessing the general education curriculum, but having more supports embedded, maybe some pull-out services with a gen ed teacher. And then outside of the tiers is our special education services.
So when you think about students that might be receiving title services, and you already said that special education services would be outside of that, where does title fit into?
It's a good question.
To MTSS?
Yeah, so currently Little Falls Schools has Title I services, and then we also have ADSIS services. And both of those fall into that Tier 1 and 2 area. So for an example, maybe as a student who is struggling in kindergarten with their letters and identifying letters, they may go to some title services, or title services may push in to help reinforce learning those letters. So that would be that Tier 2 intervention. Tier 3 might be where they have more time and more individualized time with a Title I teacher or an AVID. So Tier 3 would be where students maybe have some more pull-out time with a Title I or an ADSIS instructor to work on more letters or to maybe work on some more foundational skills. So that is where Title I comes in, but it can be a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 intervention.
So Lynn, what are some of the core components or fundamental components of MTSS?
So there are 5 components of MTSS, and I think as we go forward in Little Falls, we're going to call it our instructional model, just in the bigger scheme of things. And MTSS is what gets us to our instructional model. But the first part of it is infrastructure for continuous improvement. And that's where we talk about what is our foundation of curriculum, how are we collecting data, and how are we then using that data to inform our instruction for all students, and looking at which students maybe need a little support because they are not making as much or as quick progress. And so what are some of the other instructional services that we can provide? The second is family and community engagement. And that, I think, is important for us to have constant communication with families on how is your student making progress? What are some of the things that we're doing in the school to support your child? And how can you also support your child at home? The multi-layered practices and supports, that's a little bit of what I talked about with the tier 1, 2, 3, and then special education. So this slide will show you a little bit more in depth of the tiers or those different steps of support. Tier 1 is the core curriculum. Tier 2 is supplemental, in addition to very targeted. Tier 3 is more intensive instruction. And then we have special education, which is where we are actually using specialized instruction for our students. The fourth area or component is assessment. And assessing our students is really important, and doing frequent assessments. Assessments doesn't necessarily mean a large test, but it does mean ensuring that we know where our students are at in their skill development in more frequent stops along the way during the school year. That is also a part of the READ Act that is coming through, is some very prescribed assessments that we need to be providing our students so that we can ensure that all students are making progress. The last component is data-based decision-making. We should be using our student data to make informed decisions about where we're going instructionally and what other supports or maybe acceleration students need to have in order to continue to make progress. I think our teachers have done an excellent job this last year with their data meetings. You can hear the conversations shifting, which is exciting to see and hear with our staff to really be focused on the data for our kids.
So as for the person watching this video, as we talk about evidence-based frameworks and instruction and data-driven decisions, we're really talking about one and the same thing?
Yes.
In essence?
Yes. So our staff is going to be trained in the fall in some evidence-based practices like PRESS. We have some staff that is going through the letters training. So I think our staff is going to be well equipped for using some evidence-based practices, which then they can use in collecting data and learning to talk about data in different ways.
There's an investment that the district makes in this area too, especially in the core curriculum. This past year in grades 6 through 12, we implemented a new math program. This coming year, we'll be implementing a new math program in kindergarten through grade 5. And that's an example of getting everyone on the same page with a evidence-based core curriculum in tier 1. And we'll be doing the same thing in reading as we move into the next year or two. And so that does become, again, an investment by our district to make sure that we have those resources to support our teachers in delivering a strong core instruction.
So Greg, as you think about the 3 words that you outlined at the beginning, consistent, aligned, and evidence-based, can you talk about what that looks like or what that means within an MTSS framework?
Simply put, I think it means everybody's on the same page, and everybody's on the same page doing the things that are important. And what's really interesting and exciting about the work that we have ahead of us in this area, when I started last year new in our district, these were 3 words that I heard an awful lot from our staff, our teachers, and our families about the importance of having consistency, alignment, and evidence-based practices. And I think we've taken some really important steps to get us there. And another positive piece of this is the last legislative session that just wrapped up in May. And people will hear more about the READ Act that was put in place by our legislators. And much of what you heard Lynn just talk about is embedded within that READ Act, that we are communicating with families so that parents know where students fall within a framework system that we have in place, that we are assessing our students, that we are providing that feedback to parents, and that we do have accountability in making sure and ensuring that students are making progress towards grade level goals every year. And that's our most important goal, and that's something you're going to see within our strategic plan, that our expectation, that our ceiling is that 100% of our students are making growth within a system that Lynn is talking about with MTSS.
Great. Is there anything else either of you would like to highlight about MTSS and what it would mean for students and families going forward?
I think it provides our teachers and our families with the roadmap to where we are taking our instruction, and it will benefit all students, which is really exciting to have a framework that addresses all areas and all needs for our students.
And I'll just say I agree with what Lynn just said, is that it does address all students, but it puts a very important emphasis on that first year, that if we are really solid in that core instruction that we give every student, regardless of where they're at academically, I think it limits and reduces the number of students that we need support for in Tier 2 and Tier 3. And I'm excited about that work and where we're headed.
Great. Well, thank you, Lynn, for joining us today and for being part of that conversation.